I lived in Duarte, California, was raised in Duarte. I come from a family of 12. Great childhood. My parents really raised us with culture, and I think that's where it started. I was raised a Jehovah's Witness, so they were very strict. Years later, I left the organization, and that was quite traumatic for me. And it kind of set the stage and the foundation for what I'm doing now, because I was a totally different person. When I left, like I said, it was a traumatic experience. I was about 26 years old. And at first, I couldn't see the good. Because when you leave that organization, they don't talk to you. So I would say that I only see about half of my family. Half are very involved. There were many years where it was tough, but then later I started to really focus on the good that I got from it, the training that I got from it, the structure, the foundation that my parents laid for that. One of the things that people associate Jehovah's Witnesses with is they go door to door. They knock on the door. So when I was involved in the religion at a very young age, I was what's called a pioneer. So I would go door to door, 90 hours a month. And I would spread the word and talk to different people and study with them. Well, one thing I realized later in life is that really set the stage for me to be adaptable. You never knew who was on the other side of the door. You never knew if it was going to be what gender. You never knew what religion, what age, if they were atheists, if they were religious. You didn't know, male, female, rich, poor. So learning that from a childhood and looking back, learning that from the religion and learning those qualities have really helped me to help my client and next level to success.
Wow. That's a really positive spin you've put on that.
Yeah, and I'm interested in the Jehovah's Witness.
Yeah, me too.
I don't know how much you want to talk about it.
Tap into it.
Yeah.
This is the first time I'm tapping into it.
Oh, really?
On air.
And so, yeah, you don't have to talk any more than you want to.
No.
But
I'm ready to kind of tap into it.
A little bit. Okay.
And is it true like you wouldn't have any birthday parties, right? No celebrations of birthday parties because of Jehovah's Witness? Correct.
It's one of those things I like to say, you don't miss what you don't know. So my father was just absolutely an example. He's my example and many in the community. My dad passed away years ago, but when he was alive, even though he had 12 kids, there were many people in the organization, the hall, we call it the hall, it's not church, that they were always at our house. We had a big yard. My dad was from the country, so we had pigs, we had chickens, we had fruit trees, we had all these things. With the price of eggs, we would have scored. We just went out and got eggs outside, and so my parents set such a structure for us and others, the other kids in the area and in the street, and many people looked at my parents as their parents. Many people called my mom and dad. It was quite often that people needed something, even with my parents having 12 kids, and they didn't have a lot of money, but there would be people that they would feed. Do you need something? What do you need? Come over. People would spend the night at our house.
Are these people from the Jehovah's Witness community?
Both.
And I believe you refer to it as not Jehovah. What is another name, or how do you easily refer to like the people you don't call it the church?
No, it's called the Kingdom Hall.
The Kingdom Hall.
Right. So families within the Jehovah Witness organization from our congregation, as well as people in our community, if they needed help, my parents were the ones. My dad was the one. With that being said, my parents really made sure that because we didn't celebrate holidays, we didn't do those things, they did something for us always. There was always something. My parents created something called Happy Day. And I love this because this was something that they did, and my family that's still in does it. And it was a few times a year, and it would rotate. And so we would all give each other gifts. And one time it would be someone's big time to get a gift. It was probably a way to supplement something that we didn't even realize that we were missing, but we knew that we had that 3 or 4 times a year. A Happy Day, and we cooked and we had cake, and it was never around a holiday time. It was something that our family did. I cherish those moments. I look at that and I think, wow, they really put some thought into knowing that there were things we couldn't do, So supplementing that. And I appreciate that. It's set a foundation for me to understand that not everybody's the same. People do things very different for whatever reason. And there's always a way around it. You know, instead of looking at people and saying, wow, that's odd or that's strange, you kind of got to take a little look and look into that a little deeper and see how you can connect.
I'm just curious, without being judgmental, but what would a Christmas day be like for your family?
Just any other day.
Just any other day. But you could see that you were different, though.
Correct. And we actually, being raised, and even though I'm not part of it, I still have much respect for the organization. When I left the organization, I didn't leave it as an apostate or against it. I left it because at that time in my life, I thought it'd be better to leave out of respect than to carry that name and not live my life in accordance to the way that they structured it. So growing up, it was just like any other day. Now, my parents came in, I'm the 9th kid. They came into the religion when the year before I was born, I believe. So the older ones probably had a different view of having it and not. But for those of us, the younger ones that were born into it, it was who our community was. So we weren't really around others in the community. That we knew them, but we were with everyone that was doing the same thing. So I have found when I look back now, I'm 53 years old, and I look back now and I think, wow, there's a lot of positive. So I don't speak poorly of it at all. I have family member that's involved. I am sad that we don't have a relationship. However, I respect and understand that that's what they feel that they need to do. I'm
just curious what the position of the religion is. I have an uncle who married into a Jehovah's Witnesses family. And I know my mom's always commented that he's separate from the family. He doesn't really participate in things. What is the family relationship issue with the Jehovah's Witness? When we were all in, we were all very close. My dad was the glue for the family. But if you are part of it and you do leave, the mindset is that they want to welcome you back, obviously, because they want you in it. And when you're involved in the organization, you are encouraged to spend time with others who are living the same way that you are, which makes sense. You stay on a certain trajectory and you're around others that are living that way. And so that's the idea of it. When I first left, which was in 95, it was very difficult because I had 11 brothers and sisters and a whole community, and I walked away from everything. So that was a really hard time. That was a turning point for me because I knew people outside of it, but I didn't know them. So things got really hard. I went through a divorce. I ended up leaving. And at that point, I almost ended up homeless because the support wasn't there. It was there if I came back. There was a very hard time for me. There were times I went without food, electricity, but it made me who I am today because I wasn't this person. I realized that I took that and thought, there's other people out there, not necessarily for me, it was religion, but there's other things in people's lives that they don't realize how strong they are until they go through something. And sometimes they stay stuck and the record keeps playing that this is a victim or this is where I am or this is my story, instead of saying, what can I take from this? And that's really what I wanted to do and really focus after years of therapy and saying, what can I take positive? Because there are some very positive things. And what can I do even more to help others in business and outside of business to find their strength and to realize that sometimes things happen, but it sets you up to be a person that can help and do things in the world.
Well, to walk away from family and an entire support group and start over, I almost know what that's like. Yeah. And so what I imagine is that the difficulties of leaving is actually less than the pain of staying. And that's a really tough decision to make. I'm curious as a father of 2 now and who wants more children. And they're always saying like, that I don't spend enough time with them. Did you feel that there was enough time, a parent, like your parents being parents of 12? Was there enough love to go around? And I'm only asking because like wow, I could spend my whole day with one and they're still not enough, right? But how was that? Like, did you get to spend a lot of time with them?
Yes, that was wonderful. My mom was a stay-at-home mom.
Oh.
My dad worked, and my mom stayed at home. And as she had more children, she kept having kids as her kids were getting married. So some of the older kids helped. So like my oldest brother got married when I was 4. And so
Wow.
a couple years later, when they would start having their families, there were quite a few times when my mom was pregnant with her daughters or daughter-in-laws. And so my nieces and nephews, I have some that are very close in age. We were a very close family. Everyone always came over. I don't even remember growing up, I don't think we had a house key. The door was always open. And yes, there was a lot of love. There was a lot of love. There was a lot of, our house was the place where it was the safe haven. That's the best way I could explain it. Everyone came over. The doors were always open. The weekend, people would come over and eat. It was, I look back now and I can remember my mom cooking, and people would come over around dinner time, like might be a young couple or something. And my mom would say to us, like, okay, tonight, she'd pull a couple of us, you're going to have a sandwich because we're going to feed them. And I remember being like, yeah, I don't have to eat like whatever she made. But looking back, I believe that maybe some of those people didn't know how to say they were hungry or they needed something. And my parents had the wherewithal, they had the knowledge to say, hey, this is someone that's showing up around this time. They said, yes, they want to stay and eat. They need us. And so very loving, a lot of time. Growing up, there's so many people now that I've reconnected on Facebook with that I grew up with and for years didn't see them. And they call my mom and dad. So yes, it was a strength. It was a great foundation.
Yeah, I think it shows in you today.
Thank you.
I mean, that love, sort of emanates from you.
Thank you.
Which is really quite impressive. What was the age difference of the children?
Oh, wow. Let's see. So my mom had her last baby at 48. She had her first baby at 16 and her last at 48.
So 32 years.
So 32 years.
Wow.
32 years of, yes. And my mom looked great. I mean, so we got the good genes from mom, because people always say, you don't look 53. And I'm like, I got the genes from mom.
Yeah, we're not real familiar with Jordy, but was the place you grew up, was it sort of like country land at that time, or?
No, we had a big yard, and my parents just transformed it. We had fruit trees, and they made an area for a garden and the chicken coops, and we had the area that we kept the pigs. I remember they would say, the pigs are not your friend, but you can feed them. But we'd get home from school and we're going to feed the pigs. But of course they wanted us to fatten the pigs up. And then next thing you know, we came home one day and we're like, where are they? But our freezer outside was full. So my dad was he would go hunting. He would take us fishing. I don't do any of that stuff now, but I was raised where they'd line us up and they'd have this group's scaling the fish and this group gutting the fish and mom was cooking everything homemade and go out in the garden and get, vegetables. So at that age, I remember thinking, it's like, we want to go to McDonald's. And my mom would say, okay, hold on. And she'd make us hamburgers and get the lettuce and the tomatoes from the yard. And we thought, ew. But when I look back, wow, what a great foundation that was. Yeah. We actually ate well. We learned things. When I first started working in dentistry, which going forward a little, when I left the organization and I had to kind of figure out what I was going to do, because it was the first time I actually had my own room, because I grew up, with siblings, and then I went through divorce, and then it was the first time I had that was my standing on my own 2 feet. I started thinking, what can I do? And honestly, the cheapest thing I found at school at Citrus College was the dental program. So I said, it's 8 months, 9 months, and I can work, because I wasn't working before that. I found myself when I left a 26-year-old Black woman with a 12th grade education, and what was I going to do to support myself? Now away from my family and divorced. What was I going to do? So I had to pull myself up from the bootstraps, and I said, dental assisting. And then from there, I started working for an office in Arcadia. Well, the doctor there told me something that really resonated with me because it reminded me of something my dad would say. My dad was known for saying little catchphrases. And so the doctor said, dentistry is training for life. And at that time I thought, what in the world does that mean? And he said, you'll get it. And everyone that works there knows that he would say that. Years later, I look and I think it was because you had the relationships that you had to learn to get along with in the office. It's not just the clinical part. You had learning to talk to people and explain things. And when you're working on, and that I was working in pediatric, working on the kids and making them feel comfortable, and the systems that are put into place when phone calls, and the systems that are put into place with how the day goes and how the instruments, how the rooms are set up. Those things resonated with me because I worked for an office that had it dialed in, and my parents had it dialed in. So it felt very familiar.